Hello. Top 20 game music song tracks from the PlayStation 1 and N64. How is everybody? Welcome. I'm here with Leo. Which songs were princes from the moment they come on the screen? Oh, probably very Japanese or very cartoony. Mascot games. I'm thinking whatever was the popular cartoon at the time that happened to get a game by THQ. Right now, you're listening to the second half of Red Alert Command & Conquer Hell March. Great track. A lot of this sort of like the late 90s had a lot of that heavy guitar, and then this kind of, would you call this industrial techno? But this sort of like, this felt like early 2000s, late 90s as well, so very reminiscent of the time. Anyways, let's get to your picks. Starting with this little beauty girl. Those super MIDI horns. What the hell is this part? Well, I guess you have to turn around the song at one point, but I was not expecting that at all. That was pretty nuts. I think this theme is obviously taking cues from the Hans Zimmer era of like Crimson Tide, Broken Arrow, a lot of war movies at that time that had these sort of like military marching beats, these heroic trumpets. They almost kind of feel like you're on a Navy ship going up and down with the waves and the rhythms of it. And those big like heroic scales and notes and melodies that they use. While it's definitely trying to hit all those notes from movies in that time in the Hans Zimmer style, I think that it really still becomes its own thing. And was it this track or another one that there was a Russian composer, no, it was some Russian guy showed Hideo Kojima and the composer of the Metal Gear Solid theme, either the first Metal Gear Solid 1 or the 4 theme. And he showed him this Russian one, and it's so similar. Kojima immediately like smiles and points at the composer and goes, "Hey, these sound really similar." And the composer looks really uncomfortable, obviously, because he's being confronted with being a thief. I don't remember this part at all, with like the extra rotos and the more like... It gets a little more sci-fi, and then at the very end it goes this kind of fantasy place. But this is just a fantastic theme. Excellent momentum and heroicism and military and fantasy and sci-fi, everything there. All right, next track. So this was factory inspection from Kirby 64. I think really good use of the N64 sound effects and samples. The way that they use almost like engines starting up and as a sort of a sample, I think is really cool. That kind of like gives it really fits in with that kind of like glitchy, proggy sort of like it's kind of like a proggy trip hop almost in a way. Way heavier than I would imagine for a Kirby game. Usually I think of Kirby as light, fluffy, pink. And this is like kind of a cutesy industrial trip hop track, but it's I would never have thought this was from a Kirby game. A Nintendo game for sure. Just from the N64 sounds, but yeah, pretty interesting. Great track. Awesome. I love that rhythm. Yeah, we're in basically the same kind of, we're in this, what do you call it? Same latitude, me and Jeremy. Over 10,000 Canadians marathon Canada Day. And then in the winter, another 10,000 have heart attacks from shoveling snow. All right, next up is... Oh my God. Okay, let's guess who did this one. Everyone take a look at it. I see muscular men flexing. It looks very Japanese and weird. It's probably a One Lich Emperor track, right? Wow. I love the another use of samples for some extra rhythm. The hoo-yah, hoo-yah. So this looks like some sort of like parody game of naked guys, but being a shoot 'em up. This is pretty interesting. Wow. Giant snails, just everything put into it. It's a mixed media collage. Yeah, this is like what Japanese people think what the rest of the world is doing all at the same time. What is that red thing that it's shooting out? It's just, I don't know. Red rectangles, what they had the budget for. Great little fun track. It's got a nice, I like, again, like another kind of industrial drums, I guess. Probably reminiscent of the era. We're seeing that influence, and we're hearing that in the last couple tracks. I think it's really fun. Nice. One Lich was saying, the instrumentation of it is really nice. It's very unique sounding. It kind of sounds like you're in a big kind of something you'd hear in like a big gladiator hall or something, like with the crowd chanting, and yeah, I think the percussion works well. These kind of drums, it's got an exotic feel to it. I think it's fantastic. Really lively sound. Okay, thanks for that, Prince. Next up, Xenogears. June Mermaid. This is right up my alley. That's quite a beautiful track. It has some of my favorite emotional melodic movements when you do that slight note up. Really peaceful, relaxing, but epic and kind of sad. It's like a very relaxed sad. Now this is called June Mermaid, so I'm assuming it's got like a bit of a mystery. So I'm assuming you meet, I don't know, like you're learning of some sad new culture, mysterious new culture, something underwater maybe. Could be neat. Xenogears was interesting because it was, whereas Final Fantasy VII went with 3D characters on 2D backgrounds, I think that Xenogears went the opposite way, where they had these 2D sprites for characters with the 3D backgrounds. So it kind of ends up looking like Octopath Traveler. Oh my god, look, a JRPG character doing an egg mini quest. Sounds very original. No way. Yeah, very interesting look at the time. Apparently this game ran out of funding and has a really strong opening but a lackluster ending. It's too bad. Be nice if they came in and have like a spiritual successor to it if they wanted to finish off the story. But I mean, something like this that is big giant JRPG with those anime cutscenes and I guess they have like mechs or I don't know what you call them. I'm sure somebody here knows the better way what to call them. Anyways, our next track is... I gotta find the composer of that because I really love that. This is Grandia, the theme of Grandia. Well, if you ever did want to know what 1970s TV shows and sometimes movies sounded like, this was the epitome. That is like a perfect distillation of, like Prince mentioned, the disco influence of that dancey beat, that 4 on the floor. A lot of like very positive sounding. Everything is kind of like smiley, sunny, syrupy, with a mix of an orchestra and a disco band. Really interesting. Not at all what I expected. I can't believe this is from a JRPG. This is just blowing my mind. Not at all what I ever expected. It looks exactly like a Sega CD game. This is a remaster too, by the way. All right. Ooh, speaking of JRPGs.
Never say my songs on the stage on my own. Never said my words, wishing they would be heard.
Hey, Horky, happy Horky Day to you.
You smiling at me. Was it real or just my fantasy? You'd always be there in the corner of this tiny little bar. My last night here for you. Same old songs, just once more. My last night here with you. Maybe yes, maybe no. I kind of liked it your way, how you shyly placed your eyes on me. Did you ever know that I had mine?
That's fine. I would say that that's probably my least favorite track. When it first started, when it first opened up, I went, whoa. Oh, God. You know, this opening, I'm like, yeah, Uematsu, give it to me. Oh, I'm right there with you. Yes. 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 And then I go, oh, okay. Uh-oh. Cheesy ballad. And then they start singing. And I find singing in these JRPG songs, it takes away, it means the song usually becomes more boring because you're following the story. Their weird translation of lyrics never really lines up with me. I never hear the lyrics and think like, what a great, well-written lyric that's emotional. It's more like, they're always so literal. It's always like, you were there and I kissed your love and your love is gone. Then I drew fire from a monster and then I cast more fire. So yeah, like I typed earlier, when I hear the singing, my opinion on it drops right away, and then it has to win me back. Sometimes it can win me back. It's just not for me. I think it's pretty boring. It's really well constructed, and I guess it fits in the kind of like an end of a game. It's not my style, but I can see people that are into these more like cheesy J-pop ballads or JRPG ballads being into that. You were there and I kissed your love. All right, next up. Megaman! Now this was way more interesting for me in terms of like a ballad. Wispy Halo! Again, another track I would never have thought was from Megaman. This is the, what is it? Megaman X6 opening stage. Overseas version. Crazy. Mario Kart? Oh, I hope so. If not, we'll have to sneak one in there. Porky boy. Porky Spork. Yeah, I would not say it sounds very Mega Man, but I really, really like it. The quality is up there with a lot of the earlier Mega Man stuff, just like a totally different kind of genre. Although, you know what? I feel like if you crank this thing up at 2x speed, it might sound like a classic Mega Man song. Let's try that out right now, shall we? No, I don't think that theory worked. All right, next up. This is a game that I owned on my PlayStation 1, and I really loved it. It was a fighting game that actually had a decent little side-scrolling beat-em-up, and you unlocked characters every time you beat the game with a different character, I think. So it was, in terms of having a fighting game on a home console, I got a ton of enjoyment out of this. This is from Tekken 3. Whoa. download the Matrix to your brain! Yeah. Okay, I think we got the point there. You know, I don't remember that track, even though I've played like hundreds of hours of Tekken 3, and I think that the tracks are not, they don't like hit you over the head with sort of like with there's not a lot of catchy melodies, but I think it has kind of a like mature, I don't know, like a mature kind of underground techno club kind of sound, like you're in a futuristic or a modernish kind of action movie in some like techno club. I think it worked really well for the game. Sometimes the really catchy melodies can get pretty irritating if you have to hear them over and over and over again. And I think it fit what they were doing. They were trying to make this really like slick, ultra modern looking, more realistic fighter. So I think it fits really, really well. Alright, next up is another Prince one called Sho Aniki Kyu Kyoku Muteki Ginga Saikyu.
一つだけ聞いていいですか？
OK。
あなたはなぜ究極銀河最強男なの？
レイ。それは。
Aniki. Neat. I like all the different samples. I think they're pretty creatively used. Pretty kind of fun. Again, it's like more sort of dancey industrial rock, similar to the last track we heard on here. I think it's got a nice sound to it and a pretty good feel. I don't know what game this is. I think this is Monster Hunter World. Yeah. All right. Next up is a Final Fantasy IX track. One that I saw live in Montreal by the Final Fantasy Orchestra, the Square Orchestra, whatever it's called. They were incredible. They must lose money every time they do those shows. And that's what Square does. They lose money to make things amazing. Yeah, it did actually. That was a big surprise. The guest performer, they brought out a special guest, flamenco guitar player, just for that one track, maybe two, but it was perfect. You could tell that the orchestra really enjoyed playing this track because it's so lively, and the guest really injects some fun into it. And you know what? Like when you're watching 2 hours of Final Fantasy music with a heavy emphasis on Final Fantasy VII. This was a nice, this was kind of like a nice palate cleanser right in the middle to bump it up. That's fantastic. We got to get this on the channel at some point. All right, Dingo in Flagrante. Next up is from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. What is a man but a miserable pile of secrets? Now that's a real fantastic symphonic rock hybrid. This was a really fun game to go back and play too. Just so smooth. This music is fantastic, and it was a really... This is a good time capsule of the PS1 where you had the highest end two-dimensional sprites, like still hand-drawn, beautifully animated, better than what it could look like on the Super Nintendo, but still in that style. With this CD quality sound. You know, real drums and, you know, fake synths and stuff, but real synths doing fake things. But it's a good time capsule of that time. And I think at the time people were wondering like, oh, why don't you go 3D? But some games just need to stay 2D. Although I would say Dark Souls is the three-dimensional Castlevania. Alright, fantastic pick. Next one up is from Final Fantasy IX again. Final Fantasy IX, probably the most reoccurring game in all of these top 20s maybe. A story heavy ever again. Okay, that was some Final Fantasy IX. You know, sort of an old Baroque theme, very simple. Setting the scene in a library or some kind of like castle as well. The Guerra, one of the most relaxing places in all nine. I feel like that tune could have used something a little bit more, but I think what they were going for was this harpsichord, or what would you call that? Like the romance era of classical music. So I think it's a nice, relaxing track when you need a break and you need to say that this is a very elegant place. Maybe I could use a bit more instrumentation, but I think that they wanted to stick really hard at that harpsichord and go with that. All right, let's have a little look. Okay. So, well, what do I want to listen to right now? We're going to take a little break from these tracks. And let's try this theme while we're chilling. Yeah, I think it just kind of does what it needs to do. One Lich, I think you're right. Put a little Chrono Cross in the background. Yeah, so this was PlayStation's first PlayStation. Sony's first foray into the console after pretty well publicized that Sony was going to make a disc add-on for the Super Nintendo. There are some prototypes of them out there. Sony did create the sound chip that's in the Super Nintendo. So there are there's a lot of similar sounds. Like if you listen to the PlayStation sounds in Final Fantasy VII for their instruments, they're pretty similar. They're just like a higher res, higher def version than what's on the Super Nintendo. And then when I think something happened with where I can't remember why Nintendo balked on the idea of Sony. I think they ended up like not getting a proper deal or something, or it was going to cost too much for the CDs, or they ended up going with like Philips or something, and then nothing ever happened from it. And then Sony were lucky that didn't work out, because we ended up getting the PlayStation 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And Sony really started pulling apart from the N64 here for a lot of reasons. CDs were way cheaper to make, cartridges were very expensive. You had huge capacity on a CD, 650 megabytes compared to the sometimes 8 megabyte, 12, 16 megabyte. The biggest cartridges at the time had 64 megabytes. Only Nintendo and then I think like Resident Evil 2 used those, because the more memory you wanted on the cartridge cost you more. So just to even get a tenth of what you could put on a CD would cost big money. In Canada, some of the N64 games back then would cost $90, which is more than what a game would cost now. Which is, what was that? That was in 1998, 2008, 2018. So over 20 years ago, the Nintendo, it was incredibly expensive. There weren't that many good third-party games on the N64 because Sony had formed these fantastic relationships with third-party developers, gave them big access to their development kits, where a lot of developers felt like Nintendo was kind of hiding some of the secrets of how to make games look and sound their best on their hardware. It also took processing power from the actual, I think, the CPU of the N64 to make music. So you were not only limited by the size, where all of your samples had to be incredibly condensed, which gave it a sound. It gave it that Super Nintendo kind of blankety, pillowy sound, and a very uniform sound. Whereas on the PlayStation, you could do everything. You could have like cheesy sounding fake instruments alongside real instruments. It was really whatever the developers wanted to do. And Sony used that relationship with these third parties. So you checked on that. Nintendo wanted to dump Sony for Philips. And then this was actually a really tough time for consoles, where they thought this might be a second video game crash, because the N64 wasn't doing as well as expected. Philips jumped in with their own console called the Philips CDI. Panasonic had a console called the 3DO. These were really expensive systems that tried to max out the potential you could do with discs and CDs, but the PlayStation was smart enough to make it consumer friendly. I showed you that that E3 conference last time, where the guy from Sony goes up and all he says is $299, walks off to a standing ovation to say that the PlayStation was going to be very affordable. So you had the 3DO and the CDI. They were like $600 and $700 systems. The Atari Jaguar was still pushing the like bits part of it and saying they were like two 64-bit hardware pieces together. They had this ridiculous controller that was this big, this wide, and only had, I think, like 2 to 4 buttons on the face of it. No shoulder buttons, but then like 12 or 16 of these little tiny buttons on the bottom, like a TV remote control. Had some interesting games on it, but just really couldn't compete. Those ones all died out. People latched onto the PlayStation. The N64 lagged behind. Sega Saturn. Sega bet heavily on making their system very good at drawing two-dimensional sprites like they had in the arcade. So big two-dimensional fighters that Sega was making and doing well in the arcade, they could do that better than the PlayStation, but they couldn't do 3D as well with the PlayStation, and they pulled ahead. All right, let's get back to the music after that history lesson. Oh, this next one is one of my absolute favorites of all time. Speaking of flamenco. I mean, what can you really say about this track? We've heard it a bunch of times. It's a big favorite from Ocarina of Time. You know, because the Nintendo had that, just like the Super Nintendo, the N64 had this sort of their own kind of compression, and it gave everything a similar sound. And even though you knew everything was fake, it all felt like cohesive. So while you could do more technically on the PlayStation, I think that Nintendo, like they always do, tend to find a way to play within those limitations and focus on what really matters. A great track, which kind of gives me bad memories of because I think when you go to the Gerudo Bandit Camp, you end up getting into like a pretty lame stealth section, because it was the late 90s and we were all about that stealth. All right, yeah, this video of the meteor looks like something you'd see, like there'd be dinosaurs below being like, oh, and then all the dinosaurs were gone. Well, we could just get hit by a meteor and boom, be dead. And we'd blame it on China, probably. All right, Final Fantasy Tactics is up next with In Pursuit. On a friggin' chocobo. I think Sakimoto's work on Tactics and Final Fantasy XII, they have this kind of elegant classical quality, but they kind of stay in the background for me. They're almost more like film score-y in a way, like something you'd hear in a cutscene. I think they work well for like a tactics game that doesn't want the music getting in the way, and especially for Final Fantasy XII, which is a lot of this long combat sequences where there isn't really a change from the actual world to the combat. Final Fantasy XII, you know, I don't think back and remember very many memorable moments from it, but I do remember enjoying exploring the world. Even looking at it right now, I think it was just very polished. It felt exotic. It felt like it was really doing its own thing. It was branching away from the stronger stories of the earlier games. That sounds like such a backhanded compliment. You really went out of your way. It's so different. Like, instead of having a memorable, strong story, It was a little more low stakes, even though it had to do with like countries. I don't even know what the story was about at all, other than like political drama, worlds, countries, I guess, going against each other. I remember visiting the rabbit ladies and some drama there. I remember really not liking the main character, and it was very obvious that he was added in. The world felt geographically realistic when compared to other FF games, as did the politics. Yeah, it felt like it was trying to be as sort of realistic as possible. Some of the countries at war and gods trying to create war. How does it compare to 13? Oh, 13 dips back into... Well, 13 doubled down on lore, but went more fantastical again and more about gods, magic, as opposed to just... I guess it was because the conflict in 12 was more about... it was a conflict that could happen in our world. It really had nothing to do with magic, I don't think. It was just more about countries at war and all this crap. Anyways. Alright, next up is Ape Escape. Oceania, Coral Cave. Some more late 90s. You know, not a bad track for setting the mood. Not really a lot to it. Just a nice kind of background, kind of glitchy, some energy for going around. Doesn't really get in the way too much of trying to look after apes. Claudio! They're bad apes. They do need bashing. When Ape Escape first came out, I was so excited because I was so jealous that the N64 had Mario 64, which at that time I still feel really strongly about it, and at the time I thought was one of the best games I'd ever played. I couldn't believe how well they nailed 3D platforming. I wanted Sony to rip that game off so bad. And, because back then I thought that it mattered, that my console, Sony, had better games. When my little brother had an N64, I could just play anytime I wanted. But I just wanted more Mario 64. I didn't like Banjo. And when Sony put this out, I thought, this looks pretty interesting. It was not only interesting because it was a 3D platformer, but also because it used the dual stick controller in a meaningful way for the first time ever. And now we still control our games with dual sticks. It was a new controller, because the PlayStation 1 launched with just a regular PS1 controller that had the 4 shoulder buttons, 4 face buttons, and a D-pad. Actually, it wasn't even a DualShock, it was a dual stick controller. Nintendo first came out with the vibration in their Rumble Pack on their controllers. And the dual stick was interesting because you would go around in this game and you'd have lots of different tools. So whatever way you move the right joystick, that's which way your net would go. And you had all kinds of fun devices and tools. And you'd go into a big level and the apes would be hidden somewhere. And they had different characteristics about them. Some would be kind of cheeky, some would be sneaky, some were smart, some were stupid, some were fast, some were big. And you had to figure out a lot of different puzzles of how to get to them. It was exactly like Mario 64, where you had, instead of having to find a star and how to get there, it was these apes. And it not only meant how do you get to that part of the map, but then chasing them down. And it had more of a story than Mario, for sure. And I really loved the first one. I thought the second one, when I played a couple years ago, was kind of a bummer. But I should go back and play the first one, or maybe some of the others in the series. And it's something I really wish would come back, because it's just a really fun idea. It's put you in a level, and then he knows. They put you in a level just like Mario 64, and they challenge you to get to a spot and figure it out. And like Breath of the Wild and great Nintendo in great 3D platformer games, you see something, there's a way to get there. Alright, next up, another Final Fantasy VIII theme. This one is called Fisherman's Horizon. A lot of sappy, sentimental songs today. You know, when I first started Final Fantasy VIII, I thought, this might be my new favorite Final Fantasy game. It's so strong. It sets such a good vibe, and the music has a lot to do with that. It's a nice, mature exploration of evolution of what Uematsu was doing on 7, where 7 had a lot of very, very pure songs, but this expanded a bit more, and it felt like he kind of reached a new level with sort of his presentation of the sounds and the music on the PlayStation 1. Yeah, and then the story gets all crazy and forced. But Yeah, I really enjoyed it for the most part. Even swapping all that stuff around, they had some nice quality of life ways of handling that. All right, next up, The Wind Sings of a Journey, Legend of something. Mana. Niccolo! It's another one that kind of looks like what the Sega CD was doing with those. They're more colorful sprites, more cartoony, rounded, friendly, and the style of the way they did the characters and the maps. Nice track. Like Prince said, Western, cowboy, forest, world map. It definitely feels like its own thing and very inviting. And like One Lich said, it's a nice adventure track that's getting you pumped up and sent up on the way out. The sounds during some of the dungeons of the game. I wouldn't think of it as a dungeon theme. It definitely seems above ground. Many share songs with others, if I remember correctly. You first hear in the area called Lake Kilma. You just realized that you once again forgot to add the best tracks to your music playlist. Oh! It's from Medal of Honor by Michael Giacchino, who is now a quite famous film composer. He's doing music for Star Trek and many others. Hey, Mom! What are we doing? Well, it's all explained in the title of the video. Wow, you can hear that this guy is destined for great things. Filmic, but but still strong. Back when film scoring had strong melodies, themes, was musical, not like a lot of the crap that they have in films now, which is all just taiko drums and very atonal in the music or melody. Super emotional, super stirring. An amazing use of the orchestra. Just nuts. And this was on a PlayStation 1 game. So it would have been released in the late 90s, early 2000s. Ridiculously impressive. Michael Giacchino. Wow. Wow. All right. We're moving right along. We've got 1, 2, 3 more tracks. I won't be doing Lassos today. I have to go watch a little Canada Day celebration. Whoa! All right, this is from Ocarina of Time, The Song of Storms. Man, and I bet you that the amount of memory it took to do that track is probably still really low. And it's so memorable and sets a tone of this sort of slightly mysterious, slightly demented, but still very friendly, which I think a lot of Ocarina of Time was. I mean, all the video footage I've been showing is from Majora's Mask, which is the only N64 Zelda we have on the channel. Hey, Teddy Boy. But this whole soundtrack is a real masterpiece of setting a theme, of setting a tone, making it really catchy, really memorable, and having a real personality with all of these tracks that really sound like nothing else. Koji Kondo, genius. 2 more songs. Another one from the N64. This is one of my all-time favorites from this era. This part reminds me of Gourd Mom when he goes, Darn. Yeah, definitely. Aquatic themes tend to be really nice because when you're trying to evoke that aquatic level, you end up with usually stuff that is very kind of like welcoming and floaty, ambient, and chill and relaxing. So you've got... It's interesting how the drums do come into this part. You really don't expect it. I think it's a way of probably basically doubling the length of the track, because you can basically just repeat the track over and you just add on these little bit of drums. Kind of having these rhythmic stabs and then letting the rhythm fall before you pick it up again. Boom, boom, gives it a feel that you're slowly floating through water. Also, the tempo of it is quite slow. You have kind of some lower movements going boom, 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 ba-da-ba-ba. Finishing off a phrase of a melody and waiting before you pick it up again. It's just perfect for floating around, and it's just such a beautiful, wonderful, cozy little track. I love it. Next up, last track of the day before I take off, and this is from Silent Hill. This is Silent Hill from Silent Hill. Silent Hill. So you guys want to do opening songs? So what, like title, themes, opening tracks, closing tracks? That seems okay. Seems like we're going to get like a bunch of final boss tracks. No, if it wouldn't be a final boss, that could be a closing theme. Interesting. Well, that'd be cool. All right, well, I'm going to be off. That's what you guys want to do then? Sure. I have a couple ideas for other categories we could do. 2011 I'd like to eventually do, because that has Skyrim, Human Revolution, Deus Ex, Dark Souls, LA Noire, Portal 2, Arkham City, Modern Warfare, Uncharted 3, Bastion, Skyward Sword, Mario 3D Land, Witcher 2, Dragon Age 2, and Terraria. And then also, we could do like a Donkey Kong episode, Mario, Sonic, Blizzard, indie games, Zelda. But yeah, so maybe next week we could do, 2 weeks from now, we could do the 2011. All right, I also had one that I really wanted to put into the final thing here. Oh, yes. Okay, let's see here. Actually, you know what? I might save this one that I was going to play for next week. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to play tonight. It's Canada Day. There's lots of stuff going on. I don't know. Should we include menu themes or just opening, closing? What I like about the opening, closing is that you're setting the tone for what the game is. So it'd be really fun to go through and decide like, okay, this sets the tone for that game. If you can, how about this? I'll play the theme and you'll have to guess what game it's from first. Okay? All right, this is one of my favorite tracks. This is from NHL 98, a sports game that did not use licensed music from horrible pop rock bands, but actually used just a single composer, his friend's super compressed drums, and synths bass guitar. I'm out of here. I'll see you tomorrow with more Last of Us Part 2. Thanks everybody for joining in and doing that. If you pick a really long theme, it's not getting played all the way. So yes, be careful. All right, bye for now.